Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. If you are an entrepreneur, business owner, brand builder, or even thinking about those things, I've got the guest for you today. The things that we're going to discuss are probably the things that you're not thinking about right away when in business or branding and things like that. But first, Andy Nelson, thank you for joining us on the show. Glad to have you here. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story, your background, how you ended up in the military, what you did.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, I'll try to keep that concise. So I'm a native Washingtonian, I guess. I grew up south of Seattle. Short story, I lived in the same house, my entire youth. My parents still live there today. You fast forward to when I'm getting kind of approaching exiting high school, you get getting those calls from recruiters, right? And I'd always kind of had I'd always had a fondness for the military. My dad was in the Air Force, my uncle was in the Army. So it was just a kid like any other, playing guns around the neighborhood, that sort of thing. So I was certainly interested in joining the military. I didn't know what branch. You know what? The Army called me first. So, the Army wooed me. I got to watch back then all those laser discs, at the recruiting office and about all the different branches and all the different things I could do. And I was enamored with that. And frankly, I didn't know what I was going to do after high school at that point. My parents didn't go to college, so we didn't have those sorts of discussions. And I said, great time for some adventure and detour, figure out what I want to do. And I want to have some adventure in the Army. So I want an airborne contract and an infantry contract. And that's what I got. So there I was.
You can definitely get some adventure. So sounds like you had kind of a similar story to me, just kind of bored in a way, just looking for something, didn't really know what you're going to do.
I was an average student, probably a B+ student, wasn't interested in some things, was interested in others. But just really, growing up, I didn't have the sorts of forward-looking discussions with my parents. And say, let's prepare you for adult, life, and talk about college and that. It was more of kind of find your own path for me. And so I kind of ran up against that wall, fork in the road, and well, here's a chance to kind of kick the can down the road and figure it out later.
That's exactly what I mean. That's how mine was. I got my associate's degree, and I was just kind of like, do I want to continue stocking shelves and unloading trucks for the next 20 years? Or do I want to get into law enforcement like I had my associate's degree in? Or what exactly is it that I want to do? Of course, I was 20. So you're just looking at the whole world like, well, I haven't really entered it yet. I've got one foot in. I don't know what the world has to offer. And the Army actually called me first, but my stepdad was Air Force in Vietnam. And he's like, no, go talk to the Air Force. You want a little bit better quality of life. And so that's how I ended up there. But the Army, I was on the phone for about an hour and a half with that guy. So he almost had me. If it wouldn't have been for my stepdad, I probably would have went Army. Because it was just like it spoke to me at that right time. It was like, oh wait, there's another option here. Why not? So so after you got out, what got you into law? What made you decide to go that route?
Yeah, well, there's not a direct path. Once when I was in the Army, I really started. You find out a lot of time to read. So I really figured out. Hey, the things that interested me were history, and for whatever reason, politics, or the study of it, I guess. So as I got into undergrad, I kind of started gravitating more towards history courses, political science courses, stuff I really liked. But once again, I wasn't thinking down the road. Where does this go? How does this turn into a career? And as I'm sitting there in my junior year, I think in college, I don't have answers to that. I can go teach maybe. I think I got a teaching credential. I think at least I took the courses for teaching credential in history. So I was thinking that path potentially. Or what else? Do I become a professor? Do I work in a museum? I didn't know. So you just kind of start hearing from other people that, hey, a natural kind of, if you're going to continue your education, law school might be the way to go. I didn't have any lawyers in the family. I didn't know any lawyers. It just kind of, totality of everything seemed like that was the next, step. And so I wish it was more involved in that. I wish I had some dream of being a lawyer. It wasn't that. It was just, let me continue. I loved academia. I loved learning. So I was interested to continue education. I mean, it could maybe be a career student, but that was just the next step.
There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of learning in law school, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's brutal.
I have no idea. Well, if you can imagine, whatever, if you go to undergrad or high school, pick whatever. Imagine doing, your 3 years of college, but effectively the same general subject. Obviously different subjects within, different cuts, different slices, but just la 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 la. La la. Hey, I'm singing now for 3 years. It's involved, but I enjoy it. I really enjoy
you
it.
have the distinction of being the first guest to have ever sang on the show.
Yeah, that was a complete accident.
Oh, hey, accidents are good, right? What was it, Bob Ross said? Happy little accidents or something like that. So, but yeah, law, there's so many different aspects I think people just don't really think about. You've got real estate law, corporate law, criminal law, and you're in the trademark, patent, copyright type area, right? I don't know if there's a technical name for that.
Well, we typically put under the umbrella of intellectual property law.
Okay.
I mean, you mentioned motor property, real estate, so now intellectual property, another kind.
I should have known that. Brain dump. It's too early in the morning. So,
okay.
What we're going to talk about is defending your brand, and you've got a Facebook group on it. But the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is the first step somebody should think about when defending their brand?
Well, the first step is simply, is what I'm going to choose to kind of represent my brand, my symbol, whether it's my name or a logo or both, or slogan, is make sure that I can even actually adopt that thing in order to defend it. Oftentimes that simple step is skipped. People glob onto something they want to symbolize their brand, fall in love with it, and just go without thinking, hey, somebody else may have something very similar or identical in a similar industry, which may pose a problem for me. I might end up getting a cease and desist letter, or I may have adopted something that I love, but for a number of reasons, it may not be defensible, it may not be protectable, it may not be exclusive. And so if it doesn't function that way to kind of let you stand out in a crowded marketplace, what real value does it have? So that initial step in defending your brand is choosing a defensible brand.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people getting cease and desist orders on different things. I can't in my mind imagine how many possible brands there are across this country. It's got to be an unfathomable number.
Well, yeah, most of you probably wouldn't even know because they just may be local businesses and still kind of, the traditional, not really visible. I mean, a local tailor or whatever probably may not have a web presence, so you may not just see them unless you physically drive by. And there's plenty of businesses like that remaining in the U.S. Not everyone's online. So, yeah, I try to put a number on it. Good luck.
Yeah, unfortunately, not everybody's online. I wish that one would change. I still can't believe today in 2021, there's businesses with no online presence. Just blows my mind. It makes no sense. But actually, that leads perfectly into my next question. Website protection. What does that actually mean to protect your website?
Website can be a challenging one because a lot of people design websites. They love them and they say, I've spent the money doing this. This is mine. And so when they see another website that has the same kind of general layout and features, people get bent out of shape. That's a tough one to protect. Website layouts are really hard to protect. I'd say almost impossible, just because there's only realistically so many ways to do it that's functional, that's attractive, that sort of thing. And so, there's not a lot of policy to protect, basically give someone a monopoly in that sense, if it's really kind of functional, has some kind of some function in terms of consumer attraction, that sort of thing. So trying to get trying to not get too technical. Other content on a website, though, can be very protectable. That is, websites are probably going to be featuring a brand's trademarks, and that may be a name, words, might be logos, could be really distinct color combinations, maybe jingles, slogans, that sort of thing. So those sorts of things, when people dupe others' websites, sometimes they dupe them, wholesale, and so they grab on a lot of that stuff. So so protecting your trademarks, those can be protectable as they're featured on someone's website. Another thing that is protecting the website is not really the layout, but the actual literary content or the other content, the graphic art, that sort of thing. All that sort of material is protected by copyright law in contrast to trademark law. And that content, again, when I see people dupe other sites, they typically, they're not very clever about it. They typically cut it wholesale, and then maybe switch up the name of the company, but leave the rest. I've seen that happen plenty of times. But
a lot of cut and paste, huh?
Cut and paste job, yeah. And it's detectable. So those are the ways that a website could be protected. There's still, trademark protection potentially, and some copyright protection. There may be some patent protection as well, but I won't. That's really detailed. I won't get into that right now. It's rare. So
yeah. So because a lot of websites, like for instance, the Battle Buddy podcast, my website is through Squarespace, and they only have so many different templates, so many different things you can do. That
right.
Is that part of the reason why it's really kind of hard to do, because there's only so many different templates. That company has one, company A, B, and C over here kind of have their own templates, and you can only do so much. There's only so many combinations.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and people, I suppose someone could argue, hey, you could slice this up so many different ways. You can move something a millimeter here and this and that. There's infinite combination, but that's not real. I mean, what you're doing by trying to slice that up that way is just foster a whole lot of needless cease and desist letters, litigation, complaints, and nobody wants that. So the general view on website layout is, there's certainly minor variations, but there's a general overall layout that we see almost always, and you just can't protect that or make it exclusive to any one person. Otherwise, we're just going to have problems. So more problems.
Makes a lot of sense. So another thing you do is social media can be a real headache for some brands. What would you say the top 2 to 3 things most businesses can do to kind of protect their brand or avoid issues on social media?
Oh, on social media. Wow. Let me see. Okay. So it can be a challenge. If anyone's had to try and take down content before through a social media platform, it can be a challenge because you don't know who's reviewing that stuff. So when you're saying, if I'm understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, if you're saying, hey, my brand imagery or even my copyrighted content potentially is being used by others on social media platforms.
How to protect yourself or avoid issues there.
Sure. Well, luckily, I started to complain about the platforms, but the platforms themselves have terms of service, terms of use that everybody agrees to when they become a member on the platform. And so there's typically an intellectual property section and a mechanism for complaining, taking down content. It's usually focused on copyrightable content. So again, graphic art, most likely, or photography or literary content. That's the kind of stuff, if you see copied, you can take advantage of the takedown procedure on these various websites. They don't always work. Sometimes the review is very arbitrary, and sometimes the responses you see are really absurd. Like somebody does not understand what's going on. So I don't know how they get that function at the company, but it can work. I mean, and that is if it works, okay, it's a relatively simple way to get content removed with the low cost, little effort and no cost because you do it yourself. If it's a trademark, problem as opposed to a copyright issue, as in someone's your brand imagery, your name, your logos, that sort of thing, that could be a little more difficult because all these websites are geared toward, while they have intellectual property policies, their takedown mechanisms are really, really geared toward copyrightable content. So they're not always responsive to complaints about trademark infringement, some more than others. But anyway, so using those mechanisms can be, their own internal mechanisms to get content removed could be a very low cost way. Otherwise, it's kind of tradition. It's like, how you do it in any other traditional sense. You may have to make a phone call to the offending party if you maybe know who it is, or you think you can develop some rapport. Because it may not be doing it on purpose. It may be a little more innocent than one might think. And sometimes a nice phone call or a nice message may resolve the issue. You don't.
Do you think handling it at the lowest level like that actually works sometimes?
Pardon me?
Do you see that actually working sometimes, or how often do you see somebody's tried that?
I'm successful at that, at least a couple of times a year. I mean, it really depends on the situation. Some people, if they're counterfeiters, they're intending to do this, so that's not going to go well. But sometimes it's more of a misunderstanding, or just or never even looking, right? The thing I talked about moments ago is you got to go clear your brand first. So somebody else doesn't do that, and they start using something. If you can approach them, early enough, and it's innocent, and say, hey, great, you're starting, your own brand. You probably don't know that we actually exist in this space, and this is likely to cause consumer confusion. We're all trying to create unique identities, unique brands out there. So, for that reason alone, it's, it makes sense that you divert at this point, and choose something that uniquely identifies you. Certainly when, if we turn into a kind of a shoddy brand at some point, you wouldn't want that reputation rubbing off on you, right? I mean, there's ways you can talk to people, and sometimes they'll do it right away. Sometimes they're a little more skeptical, and I don't want to change, and they drag their feet a while, but you can tell they're thinking about it still. They're not being, they're not saying forget it. And then you kind of push them a little bit, and eventually they say, okay, I'll move. And some have to go talk to their lawyer, and hopefully if they get a good one, the lawyer will say, yeah, this is probably an issue you want to divert. So it does work. But I'd say, try to get as much information you can about who you're actually targeting or who you're going to be writing to. That'll tell you whether it's a waste of time or not.
That's a good point. Do a little bit of background research.
Yeah.
Because you never know who that person's going to be. Scammers aren't going to care if it's an innocent mistake. And it's simple changes. I could see them doing it, but some people want to play hardball and just like a fight, And in that case, you might just have to get your attorney that's on speed dial and say, "Hey, draft a letter. I need you to send something because it sounds a lot stronger from you than it does for me." So I've had to do that a few times. As not on this particular issue, but sometimes HOAs and other things. Sometimes it's just best to have the attorney send a letter. It's a little bit more force to it, a little bit more power, seriousness to it.
And sometimes, yes. And, I get asked that question a lot, when kind of advising somebody in the background on a dispute that's kind of budding and they don't know where it's going to go. They don't know how to resolve it. So I'm advising them in the background. And they say, well, I want to get you involved now. And I often say, hey, think about this now. You two are negotiating directly. I'm in the background helping you. But is it going to make sense to actually insert me at this point? Is that going to help clarify things, which is kind of the problem right now? Or is it just going to actually push the other party in the other direction and they're going to lawyer up and then this thing starts escalating? Like, you don't want that result. So think about that. Maybe let me just advise in the background, maybe you take another stab at it kind of thing. So there's, when you think about dispute resolution, you really got to think, a lot of different pathways, because it can really, it's like a blooming flower firework. You light that thing, it's, can go all over the place once you light it.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. The times I've been involved in those kind of things, it was a very clear, we've got to send a strong message, but never really thought about it that
some people should take that. Some people thrive on
that. Yeah, you really should take everything into consideration because. No offense to you. I mean, it's expensive. When you consult with an attorney, have the draft a letter, all those things. If you can handle it yourself much cheaper, you can handle it easier without the big fight. Sometimes you need to fight, though. Depends who it is. It depends what it is.
It's unfortunate, but it's true, and it's a game of there's psychological aspects and I suppose some gambling know-how, that sort of thing, risk taking. You really got to have your synapses firing a lot.
I totally get it. As a realtor by trade, I think there's a lot of similarities there. And sometimes you have to get the full picture. You have to weigh it all. You have to put all this stuff out in front of you and say, okay, what's my game plan? How am I going to attack this? What are we going to do here? What's step one, step two, and then what's plan B or plan C when plan B fails? Got to figure those things out. So.
You got to polish that crystal ball a lot, and it's
sometimes it's fuzzy.
Yeah, permanently.
So, speaking of disputes, when like co-owners of a business or something, if there's a dispute there, what's the best way of kind of handling those disputes?
This is kind of a preemptive measure. Once again, the best way to handle those disputes is to have something, almost an idol, so to speak, that you can point to for guidance. That's called a contract. So, an operating agreement or, a shareholder agreement or, the title, whatever the title is. Okay, there's going to be governing documents for, each type of entity, whether it's a partnership or whether you have an LLC or you have a corporation, what have you. A lot of companies skip that operating agreement. I'm just going to call that company. I'll call it a company agreement, just generically. They're missing that agreement. And so when something happens a month down the road or a year, let alone a year, let alone 5, whatever, and the co-owners look at each other and who knows whatever the issue is. When are we going to pay out distributions? I want to leave, the LLC. So why don't we just value my share or my membership interest? You buy me out right now. And that happens to be $2 billion. How are people going to resolve those sorts of issues when they have nothing except their memory? And guess what? I guarantee not one time in the history of the planet has two people's memories aligned perfectly. It's not happening. So that gets skipped constantly. Businesses, they pat themselves on the back because they're able to go to the Secretary of State and file, articles of incorporation or articles of organization, and they go, "Ooh, wow, success! I've organized an LLC. I incorporated." That's the easy part. The governing document, the thing that says how this thing is going to be governed, when people are going to make decisions, who gets to make decisions, what are the roles, what are people contributing, what are they entitled to, on what grounds, and under what circumstances can somebody leave, under what circumstances can we add members? I mean, all these sorts of things need to be in that governing document. So it's a tool to guide behavior, to set expectations. That way, that when there's a dispute down the road amongst co-owners, and there will be, I mean, everything, I don't care if it's a 2-second dispute. I mean, there's going to be little disputes.
There's going to be something eventually, for sure.
Yeah, there's going to be some bigger ones too. And there are going to be some ones where, but for having the idol to look toward, that operating agreement, probably going to have a serious dust up. So, you can just say, hey, we don't need to, argue about this because we talked about this and we actually agreed on this. Let's just pull out the agreement and see what it says about this particular issue. So that's what that document does. It guides behavior, sets expectations, and I think dramatically reduces the likelihood of significant disputes that could disrupt the operation of the business.
Things are pretty well spelled out in a contract, and it's there. You've signed it. Everybody should have a copy. Everybody knows what it is. Obviously that's something that should be drafted. You should be sitting down and having somebody help draft all that up. But for an entrepreneur that's out there that's gonna go into some sort of business like that with a partner, before they get to that point, any advice for somebody on how they sit down and list those things out, like what's important to them, and kind of hammer out some of those negotiations before they take it to an attorney and say, here's what we've agreed upon. Can you draft this up so we can sign it?
Sure. Yeah. I'm kind of doing this on the fly, but I'm pretty.
Oh yeah. No, but this is just general advice. Yeah. Just remember,
Oh no, I got you. What I'm saying is I'm going to give out a reference here, and I don't even know if it actually exists. But I'm pretty
okay.
Sure.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
We fly by the seat of our pants around here.
I bet if the listeners here in whatever search engine they like to use, write in top 10 elements for an operating agreement or a limited liability operating agreement, something like that. Negotiating an LLC agreement, something like that. I bet they're going to get a Forbes article or something like that has a nice list of the key points to negotiate. Or resolve, with co-owners when entering into an agreement, no matter what state you're in. I mean, there's going to be variation from state to state, but the large key core components are largely going to be the same across each state. The core components that go into the agreement are going to be largely the same across, no matter what state you're in. So that's the way.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a little bit of a roadmap that way that you can kind of go off of and figure out what you want to do. Because
I mean,
I can imagine.
Yeah, a lot. Some of the big issues are, what are the percentage ownership going to be? Are there going to be classes of membership interests or shares, voting rights, management issues, exit issues? Adding members or shareholders. Those sorts of issues. Some of those real key things. Those are going to definitely be addressed early on.
I've never been through that personally, but I can only imagine that process. Well, you should obviously know and trust your business partner. But let's just face it, whoever you're entering business with, to have these kind of discussions is probably going to be stressful at a minimum. And especially when you start talking compensation and ownership and all these different things, it can be so easy to step on somebody's toes.
You can't have it later with no document, because you're already, to use a metaphor, you're already in bed together. Once you've organized that entity, we're underway. So, you just got to do this all at the same time. It's just
you just got to sit down and hammer it out. Is no matter how uncomfortable that process is of doing it. You get through it, you set everything up, you sign everything, and that's when you roll up your sleeves and get to work, doing what your business does, providing your service.
And you got a guide. You have a map on some level, Yes, you're gonna be in charge of IT day-to-day operations. Yes, I'm gonna be in charge of marketing and sales. To tell you what, that stuff's not in there. Next thing you know, you got this oral agreement, and 3 months down the road, you're going, okay, the guy said he's gonna do sales. It's like sitting around and doing nothing.
Or God forbid, that's the one position you forget is sales, and everybody has everything figured out, and you're like, why aren't we selling anything? Because nobody was in charge of sales.
This is exact stuff I see. I see these sorts of things. That's a common one, which is two partners that are complaining about the third because the third's not pulling his or her weight. That kind of complaint. So, but nothing in the agreement says that what anyone's going to do. So if that person has their membership interest, they can just sit there. Oops. Spell that out.
Wow, yeah, that'd be an interesting situation. I'm sure you got a ton of stories. It'd be awesome to hear a bunch of them. I know some of them you probably can't tell, but that's why I asked you these questions, because I went to your website, researching, and seeing exactly. Being in the Warrior Council together, I had a really, really good idea of what you do, but I wanted to see those other little things, and that's why I kind of asked on some of the social media and things like that. So definitely some good things.
We have weird things. I like to certainly talk about a few different categories of things that I do a lot, but as you can imagine, just kind of by nature, you're kind of a problem solver. That's what you do. You get some weird questions. I've had over the years. I've had. I think when I went to one firm years ago, the very first call I got, from an existing client at the firm, they're a big apparel company, and the issue was, hey, one of our sales guys, he traveled down to Texas and rented a car. Well, it got destroyed in a hailstorm, and now the company wants him to pay for it. That was that's the issue that got presented to me, kind of thing. Like, okay, well, let's think about this. How do we resolve this? Well, let's see. And number one, the car, whether it was in his possession or not in his possession, would have been destroyed by the hail. So it's not really his fault. There's no causation. It's they're like analyzing this stuff. You just get weird things. Or believe it or not, there's a law in California, maybe in a lot of other states as well, that quite rightly prohibits differential pricing based on gender and other classes. In other words, for example, if you're a dry cleaner, you can't charge women $8 for tops and then guys $4. That's the kind of the laws. That's what it was written for.
Cool. Yeah.
That's literally, I think, what it was written for originally, decades ago. But it's written in general terms, so it can apply in different places. But I had, this is how it got used. I had a client who owned a restaurant down in Laguna Beach, and he had ladies' night, right? So, trying to get more ladies into the restaurant and the bar on Thursday night. And so it's cheaper prices for women and more expensive prices for guys. Well, so guess what? A guy sued, the restaurant. And we had to deal with that. And guess what? It's a very harsh, strict law, as in you have no excuse, basically. If you do it, you're liable, you're paying, so.
It makes sense. And I'm not surprised the guy sued on that.
Well, of course, I got, it's the kind of thing that comes across my desk and I'm going, is this a rule? Who made this up, So, by nature, we're researchers, not like every lawyer is a walking encyclopedia of law. It's not, there's probably a couple other special people out there that can do that, but very few. We're researchers, we know how to think, you apply critical and legal thinking or legal analysis, but, we're just great researchers. We can't know it all. We know how to get to it.
Do you find a lot of people just because of ignorance, maybe just lump all attorneys into just one category, just attorneys? Like that, they just automatically think that you're going to know about criminal law. Just like I was in the Air Force, right? And civilians thought I flew planes. No, I sat in a pickup truck behind it guarding it.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just all these misconceptions.
Well, yeah, and it's ignorance in the nicest sense of the word. It's not as if people are willfully avoiding learning what kind of categories of lawyers there are, something like that.
Well, it's a good thing if you can go through most of your life without needing an attorney. So
yeah, but you're right. People are generally known as lawyers or attorneys, and every once in a while you get the little extra tag on the front of real estate lawyer or estate planning lawyer or something like that. And people know what some of those are. You're going to run into estate planning. You see that on the billboards and things like that. You know what personal injury lawyer is because you see that on a bus or or whatever.
Somebody from their office is going to call you
lawyer,
after you've been in an accident.
Yeah. So I mean, right. I mean, so so I think I would guess people probably have 3 or 4 or 5 kind of categories of lawyers. The criminal defense lawyer, the prosecutor, that's maybe lumped into one. The estate planning attorney. Just a couple others. The class action lawyer, the personal injury lawyer, and then there's just a lawyer. But there's so many different little things. You might have somebody who just specializes in ERISA or something like that. Or, somebody in antitrust only. I go like this, like it's small. No, it's gargantuan amounts of law.
Oh yeah,
it's a small slice of all the different disciplines.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Our lawmakers spend a lot of time making laws, and they are complicated. And I can only imagine the time and energy to research all that stuff. And that's what I was thinking when you're saying it, talking about your love for academia and learning. And boy, that really is just a natural fit. To do all that research and look up all these things. And I can see why you ended up in law.
It was different though. I loved undergrad. I loved the lecture type, delivery. That's, you're just absorbing information, memorizing it. There's some critical thinking, but a lot of it is just regurgitating, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. Law school, I didn't realize it was it took me a while before I figured out it was Socratic teaching, not lecturing. So it's all back and forth with the class, right? Constantly. It's asking questions and having students spout stuff out. And hopefully it sounds, somewhat cogent and logical. Different kind of learning. And you're just reading cases. That's all. You're reading excerpts from cases. That's all you're doing. You're not reading law histories and, narratives about law. It's actual cases. Some statutes really, but it's really cases, reasoning. Kind of picking up the reasoning, just learning how to apply that sort of reasoning, how to understand it and how to apply it, how to write it, how to speak it.
Yeah, I don't think law school would be for me. That's for sure. Going through my business degree right now, had a lot of classes where you've got case reviews on certain things. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to lie, that's kind of painful for me to just kind of read through some of those and write 2-page paper on my opinions or summary. It's
Well, I'll tell you
not
what,
my cup of tea.
Yeah, it was another thing I did not realize is that this is going to require skills out of me that I didn't think I have, and I still don't think I have to this day. I am not a natural speaker. I do not enjoy, I don't relish the idea of getting up in front of a bunch of people. It's just not me. Never has been. And of course, now I decided to go in this profession. It's kind of just meandered into it, and then somehow meandered into the litigation side of things, which means, hey, court appearances, appearances for judges, making arguments, not even making arguments, just making quick appearances and, hey, here's the status of the case. And even that, trying not to screw up something simple like that. I've gotten better, and I'm glad I did it because it's just, like I said, it's not a natural fit for me, or I perceive it not to be a natural skill of mine. How about that?
So that's another good nugget there. Cause I'm kind of the same, like, I would not do good in front of 20,000 people or maybe 1,000 people speaking. I don't think I would be very comfortable in this situation. But I could get up in front of a group of 100 or 200 and talk. That wouldn't really bother me. But it's still in the back of my mind if and when I do those things. And just got to work through your nerves. Any advice for people who are looking to do that, whether it's speaking or whatever they're going to do? Anything to help you get through that?
Boy. I wish I had some kind of trick or tell. I don't. But what I will say is what I realize is I'm better at this than I thought I would be. And it's because it's the same thing that has served me everywhere else throughout my career in law and academia is practice, just practice. And, the quick example I'll give is, I'm in a networking group I've been in for 5 years. We meet every single week. And every single week, we get up there and we give a little 30-second, we call it a profitable introduction. You might call it a commercial or something like that. And you're always trying to think of something new and, new ways to tell people exactly, 30 seconds, exactly what you do, kind of what, problem you solve, how you make people feel, so people can say, hey, I know this person who does this or offers this good or service. And you really want to try to get other people to remember those sorts of things so they know exactly how to refer people to you. When I started, the very first time I was in this group, man, for me to do a 30-second little commercial took an hour of prep the night before to think about what to say, rewrite it over and over again, practice it, freak out because it went 32 seconds, try to shave off, practice. Oh, I just agonized over it. And, over the course of, and I write it out, I save them all. And eventually it was about, maybe a year and a half. Next, I'm not writing them all. I'm not even really thinking about a lot of them. I got the subject matter down, okay, and I know it's going to fit in the formula, and I can start to just spew it out. And so, now I don't have to. I'm not saying they're all great. They're not works of art by any means, but I don't agonize over it. I've got something to talk about, and I can throw it in 30 seconds. It's really automatic. So it takes the practice like anything else, and then it's just going to kick into gear a lot easier. That's my path. That's my advice. I'm sure there's other little hacks that are way better than that.
Yeah, I would say, in my opinion, it's just putting yourself specifically in incrementally bigger groups. Start a group of 5 or 10 people and teach them something, or speak in front of them, and then maybe 15 or 20. Just kind of build it up in there, and then eventually you might still have the nerves, but it won't be as bad.
Yeah.
You just kind of go there, but. You had a great point about practice, because our buddy Frank from the Veteranpreneur Tribe and the Warrior Council, I've been in so many rooms with him on Clubhouse over, pretty much this year, and he's always telling people about what he does. And I have seen him just get so faster and more fluid.
Yeah.
It just comes out naturally now. I've just heard it, and so it's just so natural and smooth now.
I think a lot of us folks who would dub ourselves as not natural speakers or gifted speakers, like many other things, you're impatient, right? So you know that practice is going to make perfect, or it gets you better anyway. But you want the results right away, and if it's not, then you feel defeated. Can't do this. See, it confirms what I was thinking. I suck at this. I can't. It's breaking through that, and that happened for me at some point. I mean, I still get nervous. Don't get me wrong; it's still not natural to me. But I don't have the agony that I used to have, or the real fear, or So, whereas someone say, "Hey, do you want to? I need somebody want to speak at this event." Before let me ask people. I don't know if I want to do that or not. Whereas now, right away, you got it. Without even thinking, okay, what exactly we're going to do here? I figured if I just make a quick, immediate, sudden move, then I've committed. Nowhere to go.
Once you committed, you've committed.
Yeah.
There's no turning back now. So, that's some great advice, both on the law and for speaking and being in front of people. But I wanted to highlight you've got a Facebook group for your brand called Defending Your Brand on Facebook. It's just Facebook /groups/ Defending Your Brand. You go there, you can join Andy's group and learn all about it. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. But you've also got a YouTube channel. I don't have the link up there, but I will put it in the link in the descriptions, where you have little, 5-6 minute videos or so, just talking about a lot of these topics. So a lot of great education you put a lot of great information out there. And, I know I've subscribed and I watch it. I will self-admit I watch too much YouTube.
I do too these days. I really do.
Yeah, it's too much to watch. You can always find something on YouTube. You can't always find something when it's on TV.
I get pleasantly surprised with the yesteryear stuff that I find when I look in there. If something pops in my head from my youth or something, I'm like, I wonder if somebody actually somehow happened to have this and somehow happened to upload it. And sure enough,
if you look at
gold a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff is on there. It's crazy, and you can watch full movies with ads. It's all kinds of stuff on there. But so go check out Andy's group, Defending Your Brand. Go check out his YouTube channel. You got a ton of great information. Any other nuggets of information you want to drop before we wrap up?
Oh boy,
tell us what you specialize in. How about that?
Okay, sure, why not? So, as a loose business lawyer, I do a lot of different things. I help people resolve disputes, which I mentioned or alluded to earlier. What I also do, what I like to focus on, is helping people figure out what their intellectual property might be, and once we identify it, how to go about protecting it. Because for a lot of businesses out there, this kind of intangible, invisible intellectual property just might be the business's most valuable asset. May not be that real estate, may not be all that inventory and other personal property, but the IP. Ask Apple, ask Google. They've got plenty of physical stuff that they own, but that stuff does not match the value. It's just that's tied to these intangibles like their names. Just, their names and their logos. That
absolutely seen those things on Facebook, the brand quiz or whatever, can you identify these different things? Like you said, McDonald's, Apple, these, you could describe it and most of the population would know exactly what it is. And so I can see, that's more valuable than $25 million building that their headquarters is, whatever the cost is.
I use this stupid example all the time. A lot of people have heard it, so there's going to be people rolling their eyes right now. But I said, look, if Apple decided to come out with a new line of breakfast cereal tomorrow, a good many of you would buy it. They have no experience in the food industry, nothing whatsoever. But you, as a consumer, attach so much cachet to that brand, that Macintosh logo. It doesn't matter. They can make any kind of product or offer a service, and you'd say it's probably good. It's probably quality. This is probably a really good cereal. You'd buy it. So that's the kind of value. I mean, how do you value that when you can basically put it on any product or any service and sell it hard? So
it's all about value and trust. They built your trust because you purchased their stuff for so long, and you see it all the time, so you value it. And it would be interesting.
Someone's going to buy your business. Someone's going to buy your business. They may say, "Oh, great, you've got a customer route or whatever. You got existing, contracts with customers. They're buying stuff." But I bet a lot of them are thinking, do I just want that? I'm happy with this business, or am I thinking growth? Am I going to expand? And when they're talking about that, they're not just talking about that, that real direct tangible stuff that you're selling. They're thinking about, what's the brand recognition here? I'm buying that name. I'm buying that logo. That's got, consumer association in this area and probably in the surrounding areas. So there's a value on that, in those intangibles. And you as a business owner would be wise to know that. Now, somebody like me who's, my name is basically my trademark as an attorney. It's Andy Nelson, so I can't really sell that, so it doesn't work for everybody. But a lot of businesses, you got to think about that intangible value as well. Goodwill, you've heard that. What's the value put on goodwill for the business? So a valuation expert at some point.
that name means something. If you're going to go buy the little restaurant in your hometown that's been there for 30 years, well, that's 30 years of brand recognition and signage and all that stuff, all that goodwill. I mean, there's a reason they've been in business that long. If you're going to buy that, probably going to pay a premium for it.
Yeah.
Because they know what it's worth. They know what they've built. So you had a really good point there, just to come back into a personal brand, because that is something I have seen over the last few years. A lot of people are talking about. Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about it, and so do other people, about build your personal brand, because even if you build a company and you sell it off and you go build another one because you're an entrepreneur, but you are the brand. So how are you seeing that? And how are you seeing that play out in your practice?
Well, sure. I mean, I see any number of, this is just my, small lens, I guess. Any number of, people that have a lot of these, you name the type of industry, where actually it can be really any industry, right? Where someone's really highlighting themselves. And I think that's in large part a campaign to kind of campaign for, the next big thing. People, how do I get known? Because yes, I mean, we're a lot of interchangeable parts and we kind of bounce around and move around, that sort of thing. So, you maybe want to be known as the guy who founded Oakley or whatever. Do you want to refer to as the guy? Nobody knows who you are, or do you want, just sort of, or really having, alongside, a real strong personal brand. Which, I guess if you're certain types of folks, that could lead into other sorts of opportunities. Names are very difficult to protect, but they're not impossible because, I mean, how many can we name? Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, Sophia Loren.
Those are more tied up in the actual logo and company name, though, too, right? So that's you're not really protecting the person's name; you're protecting it as the brand because it's the company name there in those cases.
Well, correct. So, if somebody's able to get such great recognition for their name, such that it takes on trademark significance, trademark rights, it's still not going to be for every single thing under the sun. Like, Ralph Lauren probably has very little in the way of protection over, automotive parts or something like that. So am I saying someone's free to start a Ralph Lauren auto parts line? No, I'm not saying that. Don't take that. There's no advice there. But you can see what I mean. That's the same with any sort of trademark, even if it's not a personal name. Is ownership really extends to the products or services that you've offered, and really kind of the natural zone of expansion, the adjacent kind of lines, the things that relate, the things that such that if a consumer saw it and it came from a different source, they might be confused about the source. They might think, oh, this. I've been seeing, for example, I saw. It was like a cookie brand, like Betty Crocker or something like that. I saw some in the store. They're making like baking tools, and I think of them, of course, as like a cake mix or whatever. But next thing you know, you're making the actual tools, like mixing bowls and things like that. And I think I may be screwing up which brand that was. But you think of it, it's different. That's a different good. That's a hard good, but okay, it's kind of adjacent. So yeah, related to Crocker from somebody. I might think it's from that same source. So that's kind of.
But if you saw Apple on cereal,
yeah, well,
that would be out of left field.
It would be, but I haven't seen anybody else do it. I wonder if someone else is going to give that a go. I don't know. Apple's you can imagine they're pretty bullish about protecting their marks.
I'm not the attorney here, so I'll give advice on that one. Don't do it. It's probably not a good idea. I don't know how that's going to play out for you, but Apple's got some big guns up there, I'm pretty sure. You might not want to try it.
Yeah.
It's probably not, unless you're looking for a fight. Who knows what they'll do. That's the non-attorney here in the room talking about that one.
I think it's a solid assessment.
There we go. All right. Well, Andy, I appreciate you taking some time on a Saturday to be on here and talk about what you do and give some nuggets of information for people to protect their brand, because I see people just, I mentioned earlier, like websites. A lot of businesses don't have websites, which blows my mind. And a Facebook page to me is not a website. A website is just about your brand and a place to be and give you some legitimacy. And it's not that difficult or expensive to do. Mm-hmm. You can have a simple one, but there's a lot of things that people just aren't paying attention to on brand, and that they need to look at those things before you get yourself into some sticky messes and trying to make sense out of what's going on when you get those nasty letters.
Sweep for minds.
There you go. That's a good one. Good way to put it. Yeah. You got to look for them. So once again, I appreciate it. Folks, go check out Defending Your Brand on Facebook or on YouTube. Connect with Andy. If you're in the Vetrepreneur Tribe, you're probably seeing him tagged all the time in questions. I think you're tagged like twice a day, at least. That's just what I'm seeing.
Very nice. Very thoughtful of everybody.
Yeah. Well, you are the expert, and when we see those things, I think I've tagged you a couple of times in different things too. So, but have a great weekend, Andy. Once again, thanks for being here.
You too, Keith. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah.